Rome had fallen, but its ghost was still alive. And one man would fight to prove the empire wasn't finished yet. Before we begin, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love reading them. For centuries, Rome ruled the world. Its armies marched across continents. Its laws shaped kingdoms. Its roads stitched together entire civilizations. But slowly, and like a candle burning out, the Western Roman Empire collapsed. Barbarians stormed ancient cities. Kings carved new kingdoms from Rome's remains. Old Roman lands became battlegrounds of chaos. The world believed Rome was gone forever, except it wasn't. Far away, in the glittering city of Constantinople, another Rome still stood, stronger, richer, and still calling itself the Roman Empire. Its ruler was Justinian, a brilliant and ruthless emperor with one dream: rebuild what was lost, restore Rome to greatness. But dreams require warriors, and Justinian needed someone extraordinary. Not just brave, not just skilled, but patient, loyal, and terrifying on the battlefield. That man was Belisarius. He rose from humble origins, not from noble families, not from wealthy elites, but through sheer intelligence and discipline. Soldiers trusted him, officers respected him, enemies feared him. Belisarius believed deeply that Rome was more than an empire. It was an idea worth fighting for, even dying for. So when rebellions burned inside Constantinople and foreign enemies tested the empire's strength, Justinian turned to only one general. And Belisarius answered, calm, focused, silent when others shouted, always planning 3 steps ahead. Soon, the emperor gave him a mission that sounded impossible: take back the lands Rome has lost. First target, North Africa, once ruled by Rome, now controlled by the powerful Vandal kingdom. Most leaders thought the campaign was madness. Too risky, too far, too few soldiers. But Belisarius studied the battlefield, trusted discipline over numbers, and marched. His army landed like a storm. He moved fast, he avoided traps. He struck when the enemy least expected. And in a stunning victory, North Africa returned to Roman control, almost like magic. It was the beginning of something huge. Justinian saw hope. Belisarius became a legend. And the world whispered, maybe Rome is not dead. But every victory creates jealousy. Whispers began at court. He's too popular. He's too powerful. What if one day he wants the throne? Jealous eyes watched him closely. Still, Justinian wasn't done. Another mission awaited, even more dangerous: Italy. The heart of the old Roman world. Ruled now by the Ostrogoths, strong, proud, determined never to bow. Taking Italy would mean fighting city by city, siege by siege, with enemies everywhere and allies nowhere. Most generals would hesitate. Belisarius simply prepared. Because he wasn't marching for glory. He was marching for Rome, and what awaited him there would test not only his strategy, but his loyalty, his honor, and his soul. Italy was once the heart of Rome. Now it was a battlefield of ruins, and Belisarius was marching straight into it. Before we go deeper, don't forget to like, subscribe, and write in the comments where you're watching from. It truly helps the channel grow. Italy was no ordinary campaign. This wasn't about conquering new lands. This was about reclaiming the birthplace of an empire. Old roads still carried the memory of Roman legions. Broken statues watched in silence. Cities that once ruled the Mediterranean now struggled to survive. The Ostrogoths ruled firmly. Warriors hardened by war, disciplined, proud, and convinced they were the rightful heirs of Italy. They didn't see themselves as invaders. To them, they were protecting Rome. And that meant Belisarius was not just fighting armies, he was fighting history. He arrived with a small force, far smaller than what most generals would demand. But Belisarius understood something every great commander knows. Battles are not won by numbers, they're won by decisions. He moved with incredible patience. Instead of charging recklessly, he watched the enemy, studied the terrain, and struck at the exact moment when confidence became carelessness. City after city fell, not through brute force, but through strategy, surprise, negotiation, and psychological pressure. Sometimes he fought with swords, sometimes with words. He promised safety to civilians. He treated prisoners with respect. Slowly, Italians began whispering, maybe this Roman general is different. But victory always comes with shadows. Every success in Italy sent shockwaves back to Constantinople. Politicians tightened their grip. Advisors surrounded Justinian with caution. He's becoming too famous. People love him more than they love the emperor. Be careful. Generals like him become kings. Seeds of doubt were planted. And yet, Justinian needed him. So the emperor watched, trusted, and feared him at the same time. Meanwhile, in Italy, the war grew brutal. Sieges dragged on for months. Supplies dwindled. Disease moved through camps like silent assassins. Belisarius didn't just command armies, he carried the weight of thousands of lives. He rode through the camps at night, speaking with soldiers, calming fears, inspiring courage. They followed him not because they were ordered to, but because they believed in him. And every time the enemy expected him to retreat, he did the opposite. He struck bold, impossible blows. Rome, the eternal city, eventually opened its gates to him. When Belisarius entered, he didn't parade like a conqueror. He walked quietly, almost reverently, as if paying respect to the ghosts of emperors who came before. For a moment, the dream seemed real. Rome, reunited with Rome, but dreams attract enemies. The Ostrogoths regrouped, new armies rose. Betrayals began to whisper along the edges of alliances. Italy turned into a chessboard, and Belisarius was playing against men who would rather burn everything than lose. And while he commanded on the front lines, another battlefield was forming behind his back, the imperial court. Jealous rivals prepared letters, accusations, subtle reports meant to poison Justinian's ear. Because the more Rome praised Belisarius, the more dangerous he became. Not to the empire, but to the people who feared losing power. And soon Belisarius would learn, the most dangerous enemies are not always across the battlefield. Sometimes they sit beside the throne. Belisarius had conquered Africa. He had defended Rome. He had achieved the impossible. But now the greatest threat wasn't an army on the battlefield. It was standing behind him. Before we continue, hit like, subscribe, and write in the comments where you're watching from. It helps bring history to more people. After the siege of Rome, Belisarius pressed deeper into Italy. The Ostrogoths were shaken. Divisions tore their ranks. Cities that once resisted proudly now quietly opened gates. They feared him, they respected him. They whispered his name in awe. Belisarius didn't just win battles, he earned trust. He paid for supplies instead of plundering. He protected civilians instead of exploiting them. He disciplined soldiers who abused the conquered. Slowly, Italy began to feel Roman again. But back in Constantinople, danger brewed quietly. The court, full of jealous generals and scheming ministers, began to whisper, "He is too popular. He might seize power. He fights for himself, not the empire." All lies. All poison, and Justinian, brilliant, ambitious, but ever suspicious, listened. Yet there was no choice. The campaign had to continue. Belisarius captured Ravenna, the Gothic capital, almost flawlessly. The city fell not to overwhelming numbers, but to his strategy, patience, and unshakable calm. And then, the unthinkable happened. The Gothic leaders, desperate to survive, offered him the crown of Italy. "Rule here. Be emperor. We will follow you." Every soldier, every advisor, every historian could see the opportunity. Any other man would have seized it. Any other man would have accepted and carved out his own empire. Belisarius did not. He feigned interest only to prevent unnecessary bloodshed. Then, with unwavering loyalty, he handed the city, its riches, and the defeated leaders over to Justinian. He refused glory, he refused power, he refused betrayal, and Justinian's court responded, as always, stripping him of command, removing his wealth, reducing him to a sidelined hero while others collected the credit. The empire needed him again and again. Persia attacked, rebellions flared. Borders crumbled, cities begged for salvation. And Belisarius, older now, outnumbered, underfunded, yet wiser than ever, saved the empire once more. His victories were astonishing, but the court whispered their suspicions louder. "He is plotting, he is too influential. He could take the throne." Each rumor was like a blade. And then the darkest moment came. Belisarius was accused of treason. The general who had restored half an empire, defended Rome, and outwitted the strongest enemies of his time, stood in disgrace before the very rulers he had saved. His wealth taken, his supporters silenced, his honor questioned, and yet through all of it, Belisarius remained calm. History had turned its back, but the man who had carried Rome on his shoulders would not bend, break, or betray. because he understood the ultimate truth. Sometimes the enemy you cannot see, the one that whispers, plots, and waits, is more dangerous than the enemy you can fight with swords. Even in disgrace, his legend endured. And even when the empire turned on him, the empire still depended on him. The Lion of Rome had survived betrayal, again, but the trials were far from over. Belisarius had been humiliated. His victories had been celebrated, then buried. His glory stolen by court intrigue, and yet history was not done with him. Before we continue, don't forget to like, subscribe, and write in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing the global reach of history lovers. Years passed. Belisarius lived quietly in Constantinople, older, scarred by battles, and aware that the empire no longer trusted him fully. His enemies believed him defeated. The court thought he had faded. The world assumed Rome's last great general was gone. But the empire was fragile. Borders were under attack. Enemies lurked everywhere. Cities burned, chaos spread, and suddenly a call came. Raiders approached the northern frontiers. The Danube was under threat. Villages were plundered, citizens fled in terror, and one desperate message traveled faster than armies could march: send Belisarius. Justinian resisted at first. Pride and suspicion held him back. Younger generals were eager for fame, confident in their abilities. They failed. Step by step, the empire was losing ground. Constantinople itself trembled under the threat. Markets closed, priests prayed. Citizens whispered one name like a beacon: Belisarius. The emperor swallowed his pride. He summoned the man he had once disgraced. But when Belisarius arrived, the situation was worse than ever. His army was small, supplies were scarce. Veterans were retired, volunteers inexperienced. Everything seemed stacked against him. And yet, when he stood before his men, a transformation occurred. The calm returned, the strategy returned. The lion's eyes burned with unbroken resolve. "We defend our home," he told them. Ambushes, clever traps, and decisive strikes turned hopeless situations into victories. Slowly, the invaders were repelled, cities stabilized, fear gave way to hope. Belisarius had saved the empire again. And yet, history is rarely fair. Once more, jealousy and intrigue waited behind the throne. Courtiers whispered, envy stirred. Lies circulated. He was accused, quietly, subtly, politically. His loyalty questioned again. His influence threatened. Still, Belisarius endured. He fought battles few could imagine, survived betrayals no soldier could anticipate, and preserved Rome's legacy without ever seeking personal power. By the end, the old lion had proven something few empires realize. Sometimes nations survive not because of walls or armies, but because of the men who refuse to let them fall, even when no one thanks them. Belisarius's courage, patience, and loyalty became legend, not just for victories won, but for honor maintained. He reminded the empire and the world that greatness isn't always measured by crowns or wealth, but by steadfastness, courage, and sacrifice. Even in disgrace, even under suspicion, he never wavered. The lion had returned. Belisarius had saved Africa. He had reclaimed Italy. He had defended Constantinople itself. Yet the cost of his victories was far heavier than any sword or arrow could ever inflict. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and write in the comments where you're watching from. It truly helps share history with more people. Belisarius had devoted his entire life to the empire. He had marched across scorching deserts in Africa, battled through the ruins of Italy, and faced Persia with courage few could imagine. His body carried scars from countless battles, but his heart carried wounds even deeper: betrayal, envy, and the burden of responsibility. He had given loyalty, skill, and wisdom without hesitation, and yet gratitude was scarce. Back in Constantinople, the palace buzzed with intrigue. Silken-robed officials debated strategy and comfort, while Belisarius had spent years under the sun, rain, and snow. To them, he was not a hero. He was a reminder, a living warning, that power could outshine the throne itself. Meanwhile, the empire remained fragile. Wars drained its treasury. Plagues devastated its people. Rebellions threatened to unravel the very fabric of Roman authority. And still, when disaster struck, the empire called for Belisarius. He answered every time, but the weight was unbearable. He had lost comrades to disease, hunger, and betrayal. He had seen cities destroyed, families scattered, and civilians slaughtered, and yet he endured. Even his personal life reflected the strain of court politics. His wife Antonina was close to Empress Theodora, a powerful and sometimes manipulative woman, and palace intrigues often crept into their marriage. Belisarius fought invisible battles, whispers, rumors, subtle accusations, battles more exhausting than any battlefield he had ever faced. Yet when the empire called, he answered without hesitation. Because he believed in something greater than himself, Rome was worth saving no matter the cost. He no longer fought for fame, wealth, or recognition. He fought for survival, for the soldiers who trusted him, and for ordinary people whose lives depended on men of honor. And still, history often forgets such men. Statues were rarely erected. Songs of victory were often rewritten to praise others. His name faded from celebrations, even as the empire survived through his brilliance. Yet historians looking back would see the truth. Without Belisarius, Justinian's dream of restoring the Roman Empire would have failed. Without him, the Eastern Empire might have collapsed sooner, leaving Europe exposed to countless threats. He had not just won battles, he had preserved civilization itself in ways the world may never fully measure. And that is the true cost of greatness, not the scars on the body, not the exhaustion of endless campaigns, not even betrayal by those you trust most. The real cost is to give everything and be nearly forgotten. But through storytelling, through history, through memory, Belisarius is remembered, not just as a general, not just as a soldier, but as the last lion of Rome, a man who fought not for glory but for honor, a man who sacrificed everything for a world that rarely rewarded him. If you're still here, hit like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story has traveled. Every empire has a guardian, a warrior whose courage delays the inevitable. For Rome, that guardian was Belisarius. By the end of his life, Belisarius had seen everything. He had rebuilt cities, restored provinces, and defended Constantinople itself. He had marched through deserts, endured sieges, faced vast armies, and overcome impossible odds. And yet, in the streets of the imperial capital, he walked quietly, almost unnoticed. Young officers passed him with reverence, curious about the legend he had become. They saw history embodied in one man, a general whose courage and loyalty surpassed that of any crown, any emperor, or any throne. Belisarius had learned many lessons over decades of war, but the clearest truth of all was this: empires survive not because they deserve to, but because men like him refuse to let them die. He could have taken power in Italy. He could have seized revenge on those who betrayed him. He could have built his own kingdom. He did none of these. For Belisarius, Rome, the idea of Rome, was bigger than any throne, bigger than any palace intrigue, bigger than personal pride. History rarely shows mercy to heroes like him. As age weakened him, court whispers returned. Old rivals whispered of conspiracies and plots. His loyalty was questioned yet again. Some say Justinian eventually forgave him. Others claim he was punished to the end. But the truth is simple and powerful. Belisarius died without bitterness. He did not rebel. He did not curse the empire. He did not gather secret allies. He simply accepted the world as it was, as he had accepted every battlefield. And when he left this world, the empire he had fought for still stood, not because of walls, armies, or gold, but because one man, time and again, refused to let it fall. That is why history remembers him not only as a general, but as a symbol. A symbol of courage in a corrupt age, a symbol of loyalty when betrayal ruled, a symbol of sacrifice when rewards never came. When asked, who was the last great Roman general? One name rises above all: Belisarius. The man who fought wars he did not start, for rulers who mistrusted him, to save an empire that barely appreciated him, and still won. His life teaches a lesson every empire should never forget. Power builds nations, but character saves them. And as the story of Belisarius fades into history, one truth remains: he may never have worn a crown. He may have been forgotten in his time, but in the hearts of history he will always roar. He was the last lion of Rome. Thank you for reaching the end. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and share your thoughts. Do you think Belisarius truly was the last great Roman general?